Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror comedy film. Make Me Shudder, Part 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. A group of friends decide to check out the Red Stair Mansion, which is a haunted building. The leader of the group, Nick, wants to go inside, and he manages to convince his friends, Holy and Moly, to come along with him. The other two cowards don't have the guts to join Nick, so they decide to wait outside. Now, Nick and the two enter the mansion and find the red stairs. Nick explains the background of the stairs by saying the owner of the mansion had fallen to his death right next to them. The boys continue exploring the mansion and they suddenly hear a sound. Holy and Moly get so scared to yell out, "Holy moly!" But Nick just says they're imagining things. Nick leads the way and tells the two cowards about some victims that hanged themselves in this mansion. The boys find a mattress and Nick makes Holy poke it with a stick. Holy does so with hesitation, but Nick suspects the presence of a ghost. He flashes his light up the wall, and a creepy doll falls in front of the boys. The two run away out of fear, and they bump into the other coward students outside. However, Nick simply taunts his friends and plays with the doll's hormones. The next day in school, Moly shows his buddies some clips from last night, and then Nick and Holy also arrive. The boys discuss the plan for the night, but the cowards don't want to go this time because their moms won't allow them. Despite their resistance, Nick forces the cowards to come along. At night, the group makes its way to an abandoned building where a student had apparently committed suicide due to his low grades. Nick openly challenges the ghosts, while the other boys cower like little chickens. Nick doesn't care about them, so he decides to explore the building while they follow behind him. As the group approaches the gate, one of the cowards starts praying to Buddha, and the others join in apart from Nick. Holy notices a couple of ghosts. He panics and tells Nick about it. He flashes his light at the ghosts, but they seem to have vanished. Now the group reluctantly moves forward, while Nick calls out to the ghosts hoping for a response. Suddenly, Holy notices some water droplets and looks up. He spots the suicide ghost named Mark. He panics. His friends also scream like scared children. Nick checks what the fuss is all about, but doesn't see anything, so he scolds the group for overreacting. The group enters the building, and a tense sequence follows as they move up some stairs. They start to hear some weird noises, and then Mark finally makes his appearance. The group panics and climbs over a drop-down gate to escape Mark. However, Holy gets scared out of his holy shit and can't move. The group eventually drags him to the other side before Mark can catch him. A chaotic sequence follows as Holy drops his shoe and fails to get it back from Mark. A teacher couple named Romeo and Juliet hear the screams, so they decide to check out what's going on. Now Holy is reunited with Nick and Moly while the others evade Mark. The three boys laugh about the whole situation because they think this is a prank. However, Holy says he didn't hire Mark, and the boys quickly realize that the building is actually haunted. They suddenly hear a scary noise from the toilet and start to panic, shivering his smelly sausage. Moly is forced to check it out and gets pushed into the toilet, but luckily, it's empty. However, Moly is suddenly dragged inside by Mark, so he begs Mark to let go of his holy moly life. Luckily, Nick and Holy act fast to go to rescue Moly. After that, the boys manage to run away from the toilet. They are then reunited with the others. However, one of the boys named Oil starts to experience an epilepsy, and the others hold him down. They try all kinds of solutions that include slapping oil in his oily face and even placing a French cap inside his oily mouth, but it's of no use. Suddenly, Mark appears, and the group has to leave Oil alone to save themselves. Meanwhile, Romeo and Juliet enter the mansion and split up to find the boys. Now, Oil manages to wake up from his seizure, but notices a ghost teacher named Penny, who vanishes right in front of his eyes. The group comes back to get Oil, but he's not there anymore, so they decide to look for him. The lights suddenly go off, causing Nick and the cowards to be backed into a corner. The boys sit together and try to come up with a plan to escape, but then one of the cowards starts floating in the air. He calls out to the other to help him, but to no avail. With no other option, the other student begins to pray. Nick and the others join in, and their efforts seem to work at first. But then, Mark appears and scares them all. The boys decide to pray some more and look up after counting to 3. However, Mark is still there and has started to float, so the boys go crazy and climb on top of each other to get to the other side of a large gate. Chaos ensues, and everyone crosses over, but Nick is caught by Mark, and the others abandon him. Nick asks for help, but nobody has the guts to save him. This leads to a hilarious exchange, where Nick mocks Mark for his GPA and school choices. Mark says he killed himself because he didn't pass his exams, so the other boys also make fun of him from a distance. Nick eventually escapes Mark's clutches and tries to get away, but it's caught once again. Nick asks Holy and Moly for help, but they are too scared to offer him any holy moly favor. Mark takes Nick away, and the boys chase after him, but stop right before a dark entrance. They are unable to see anything at first, but then Nick comes crawling toward them. The boys cheer him on, but Mark drags him back inside. Molly decides to man up and starts throwing his shoe at Mark. However, Mark keeps throwing the shoe back at Molly and ends up hurting Holly. It gets a little funny for a bit, but then Mark suddenly attacks the boys and chokes them. Luckily, Nick shows up to land a blow on Mark, and this allows him to run away with the others. The boys reach a gate and are greeted by Juliet. She berates them for being reckless, but offers to lead them to safety. Juliet tells the boys to go inside a room filled with chairs, and they reluctantly agree to do so. However, she locks them inside and walks away despite their best efforts to reach out to her. Things aren't looking good for the boys, but they need to find a new source of light because Nick's flashlight is running out of battery. Nick spots a candle high up on the wall, so Holly lifts one of the boys to reach it, even though there are chairs everywhere. Nick gets the candle and tries to look for a way to light it, but the boys hear noises from outside and think it's Juliet. Unfortunately, it's actually Mark, who angrily approaches the boys. They go to the other corner of the room and look for the matchsticks, but can't find anything. Nick oddly asks Mark if he has any matchsticks, and the ghostly ones would still be okay, but Mark says that he won't give them up so easily. Holly and Molly try to negotiate with Mark for the matchsticks, so he decides to hand them over, but drops them onto the floor. Mark promises not to haunt Holly, who goes to pick up the matchsticks, but immediately goes back on his word and grabs Holly's head. This prompts the cowards to run away, and they bump into Oil, who is still quite weak and oily. Suddenly, Juliet shows up and scares them briefly. Meanwhile, Nick and the remaining boys are left alone with Mark, who just stares at them. Nick finds some pillows in the lockers and gives them to the boys to get some sleep. Meanwhile, Juliet tells the cowards to take care of Oil, who still needs to recover. Romeo arrives and tells Juliet that they need to go find the others, so she asks the cowards to stay here and not leave the room. Oil wakes up from his pig-like deep sleep and asks for a calendar as he wants to know the date. After getting the calendar, he remembers a story he once said about a haunted building. A flashback shows Nick narrating Mark's tragic story to the boys inside the hostel room. That's when Oil had mentioned that there were reports of some teachers killing each other over a suspected assault and pregnancy. This incident left the teachers to live on as cursed souls, which is why they appear on the 8th or 15th of any waning moon. Back to the present, Oil and the cowards want to leave despite Juliet's warnings, so they go to look for Nick and the others. It turns out Nick and the gang are actually sleeping with Mark, who is right next to Holly. Suddenly, Holly wakes up in the middle of the night and panics when he sees Mark. Holly and Nick have had enough, so they unite with the other boys and attack Mark with their pillows. Suddenly, the phone rings and Mark picks up. It turns out to be Nick's phone, so it makes Nick confused as to why a ghost has his property. Now Nick and the boys savagely attack Mark and come to the conclusion that he is actually not a ghost. Mark is questioned by everyone, but he doesn't give any straight answers. Nick acts smart and openly challenges the spirits to come and show themselves. That's when the boys spot a portrait and learn about the ghost teacher, Penny. Suddenly, there's some knocking, and the boys panic at first, but it's just Oil and the cowards. However, everyone runs away after hearing some footsteps that actually turn out to be Penny. The group gets scared as Penny walks around the corridor, but Nick decides to act fast and looks for a candle. However, he brings down the fake wall and exposes this place to be room 6/5, which is actually a haunted room. Now, Penny shows up and reveals her true form. Romeo and Juliet come to stop Penny, who has decided to punish all the boys within her sight. Penny reasons that the boys do not respect their teachers, and then she goes from target to target. After beating up most of the boys, Penny says they have to stay with her forever. She uses her ghostly powers to whip up a storm and pushes the others against the wall. Suddenly, Penny's eyes also pop out and she attacks the group. Now Nick wakes up next to his buddies. He tries to figure out how everyone got there, and then he awakens his group. One of the boys is missing, so they decide to go look for him. The group finds a sign of their school, and then they are greeted by Romeo and Juliet. However, Penny also shows up with the missing boy. She throws him in front of the team and summons her dead students as well. The group tries its best to get away from this army of ghosts, but Penny continues to attack them for not respecting her. The group splits up, and some of the boys try to hide along with Mark. The student ghosts come closer, so the boys ask Mark for help. After a brief discussion, the boys pour some blood on Mark's head to make him look like a ghost, just like before. Now Mark goes in front of the student ghost in his disguise and tries to act scary. His tactics manage to work on the ghosts, and they walk away without much fuss. Now everyone comes back together, and they find their lost friend kidnapped by Penny. They think he's dead at first, but he luckily shows himself to be alive, although he scares the group for a bit by holding onto Holly's leg. Everyone wants to leave, but Mark spots a live class, so the others also check it out. Penny shows up, looking for them, so they rush into the room. There, they are transported to the past, when Penny confronted Juliet for having a hormone affair with Romeo. This leads to an argument, and Penny ends up stabbing both Romeo and Juliet to death, after which she is also killed by Romeo's blade. Back to the present, Penny turns to her ghost form and attacks the group with her knife. They run away once more, but are stopped by the student ghosts. Penny uses her powers to make everyone's hair erect, but Romeo and Juliet distract her before she can hurt the boys any further. However, Holy still ends up getting slapped by Penny multiple times, and it changes the frame of his face. Now the group tries to hide under a table, but Penny pukes at one of them and says they can't escape her. After a brief game of cat and mouse, Penny and her student ghosts corner the group. Penny starts choking Nick and whips away the others, who offer themselves instead. Luckily, Romeo and Juliet show up and ask Penny to think back to what actually happened back when they were alive. A flashback shows a teacher who had assaulted Penny and made her pregnant while she was unconscious. This prompted Penny to kill the teacher, but she also blamed Romeo for it, which was why she ended up killing him and Juliet as well. The ghostly Penny refuses to believe this, so the group begins reciting a prayer respecting their teachers. This makes Penny emotional, and it becomes even more difficult when she looks at all the weeping boys. Penny finally releases Nick and tells the group to leave after they bow down to her and beg for forgiveness. Now that everything is over, Penny breaks into tears and vanishes into thin air without leaving a trace of her ghostly hormones. The group asks Mark to come with them, but he reveals that he is actually a ghost who was instructed to keep them away from the haunted building. The ghost couple, Romeo and Juliet, ask the group to go to room 6/5 and burn their remaining pictures. They eventually do as they're told, and Holy becomes emotional as he thinks of Mark. However, this causes Mark to appear, so the boys panic again and run away. The movie ends with Mark looking at his burning picture and vanishing once it's completely erased. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.